Yeah, I think there's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes that we're never made aware of in terms of particularly diplomatic relations with places like China.
Yes, and I think from time to time there might be things that quite rightly are kept secret about how the nation operates and what it does. Certainly when we think about our security services, for example, they need to operate in secrecy to protect us. But on a broader thing, in terms of business and trade, I think there needs to be greater openness. And the whole thing about Andrew and China, the reason it is such a vast story, well, it's multi-layered, but what really stands out for me is the actual grubbiness of Andrew's arrangements, like this picture palace kind of thing, which was established in China and was supposed to be trade, blah, 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 the typical kind of stuff. He was going to have 2% of any profits generated. You know, well, it just smacks of some kind of grubby deal.
Yeah, like some kind of pyramid scheme, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and there he is with shady at best Chinese businessmen.
Yeah.
I know he denies being a spy and all of that, but there seems to be...
But he's not the only one that he's been meeting. There's been other people as well involved in all of this.
Yeah, and how much was it just because he was on some headlong quest to try and line his own pocket?
Well, that's the trouble with Andrew, isn't it? I mean, he was friends with Epstein because he ended up borrowing money from him, you know, and at the end of the day, you'll be friends with anyone who gives him a bit of cash.
Yeah, but he's
that
not
simple.
Skint, can he? You know,
well,
his
mother left him a few quid, but he hasn't done any work for quite a long time, has he?
No,
or if ever. Speaking of work, let's talk about Angela Rayner. She was apparently up in the north of England yesterday, launching this new devolution revolution, which nobody's asked for, by the way. I was talking to an MP yesterday who came on to my show and was so useless that all he did was babble at me. Just kept talking and talking and talking. Jim McMahon, his name was, devolution minister. Didn't actually say anything, but did that Labour thing where he just sort of kept on sort of pushing through. But she basically wants to create more directly elected mayors, which will cost more money to the taxpayer, who will impose a mayoral precept, which is basically another tax, not called a tax, on the poor people of this country. So millions of people basically could be paying more council tax because of this revolution they're doing.
Well, if you look at the pictures of Angela Rayner from yesterday, you'd think she was possibly auditioning for a Shawaddy Waddy tribute band.
I've just seen the shoes.
Because she's got a pair of shoes on there, which Shawaddy Waddy would be very, very...
They'd be very proud.
Very proud of.
Right. Teddy boy shoes, they've described them as.
Yeah, indeed.
Very strange indeed. I mean, how do you dress like that if you're the Deputy Prime Minister? Shouldn't you be wearing a suit or something?
Just expressing her character.
Yeah, of course. No problem at all. Slightly more worryingly, though, considering yesterday that I think it was Harriet Harman who accused Reform of being a threat to democracy on the basis that, you know, they're doing things that maybe people quite like, i.e. populism. They're now saying that they might do away with some of the local elections that were supposed to happen in May of next year because this new formed, you know, precept or whatever it is of local mayors, they won't have any elections.
Yeah, so the mayoral precept...
That's all right, then.
Yeah, it's quite a complex thing. Yeah. And I'm not entirely sure that I've firmly gripped this issue. I'll be completely upfront with you.
No, nobody does.
But what it appears they want to do is in an area where you have more than 1.5 million people resident, they will then establish mayors.
Yeah.
So think, oh my word, 2 words, Sadiq Khan.
Oh.
Mayor of London, right? So there's a very good reason not
Andy Burnham's another 2 words
having
you
mayors.
Might not want to do.
Andy Burnham, big regions, 1.5 million people, they'll have mayoral elections, and I think what they're aiming to do is kind of strip away the local kind of authority and have a mayoral kind of authority, a bigger kind of council.
Which again, if you're looking at London as an example, is not a great example to follow, is it?
No, and I like the fact that we've got a local council in our borough where people are accountable and you know who the local councillors are. And you can elect them
and deselect them and all the rest of it.
Exactly, and they have meetings which you can go to and lobby and all of that. I think local accountability is very, very important. In a way, Labour are trying to sell that whole idea, but it seems what they're saying and what they're kind of proposing seem to be a little bit at odds with one another.
And also, what you get with people like Sadiq Khan and Andy Burnham is they appoint loads of people to do particular jobs. They don't actually use people who have been elected to do those jobs. And, of course, as ever, it ends up with more taxes for ordinary people to pay so that the state becomes even bigger.
Because what they're saying in the papers today is there will be a mayoral precept. People might, if they look at their council tax bills, see that you have a policing precept, for example.
Right.
That's the element of your council tax that goes towards policing.
Yes.
A mayoral precept would just be a brand new tax, everybody.
So, guess what? They won't take it from anywhere else. They'll just add it on. So that means you'll be paying more money for the same services.
Who'd have thought that?
But for more people to work in the public sector, it's absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
Talking of which, on the same page of the Daily Mail, page 12, European judges could be allowed to overrule British courts as part of Keir Starmer's plans for a soft Brexit deal. This is another one that he's getting massively wrong. People voted in this country to leave the European Union in 2016 by a big enough margin for it to have been done properly. It wasn't really done properly, but Boris Johnson was then elected in 2019 to get it done properly. It still wasn't quite done properly, but now he wants to take us back in. And I was reading in another piece today, the European Union is actually suing Britain for not allowing enough foreign workers to come and work here from Europe.
And how many of the day-to-day irritations that people have in this country are based around decisions made by the European Court of Human Rights? I would suggest many of them that have impacted on a lack of deportations. People claiming their right to family life. Because whilst they've been committing crime in this country, they've fathered children. And they then go on to use that as an excuse to stay and not be deported.
Well, it was that ludicrous recent one where the guy who was actually molesting his own children was told that he could stay here because he had a right to family life with the family that he was actually abusing.
And these decisions are so often courtesy of the European Court of Human Rights.
Absolutely.
And Starmer wants the European courts to rule over us even more than they do today. Well, I don't really think that's what he was elected to do, somehow.
Yeah, and Tory MP Mark Francois quoted as saying, in his heart of hearts, Starmer remains an ardent Remainer. And of course he does. He was President Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn. He tried to get a second referendum organised, failed, but always wanted to have one. He now says that he doesn't want to rejoin the European Union, but everything he says is a lie. So presumably he does want to rejoin the European Union.
But it's the elephant in the room for this Labour government, isn't it, Brexit?
It is.
Just a mention of the word sends them into fits of apoplexy.
Well, I think we're right in saying, are we not, that there is not one member of the Cabinet that voted to leave the European Union. They all voted to stay in it. So
ties are inevitably going to become closer because that's what they want.
Yes, exactly.
It's a backdoor destruction of Brexit, basically.
Exactly right.